Once again, for those who've just joined us, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us from around the world. Welcome to today's webinar, Wellbeing in the Workplace for Education and Emergency Practitioners, and what would be our role in terms of collective action to ensure well-being. I'm Estambao, the INEE PSS-SEL coordinator. I'm delighted to be the moderator for this conversation today. And on behalf of the PSS-SEL Working Group, I want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us for this important reflective conversation for the next 90 minutes or so. As we kick off, allow me to say, please type on the chat your name, where you're joining us from, where you work, and what is your role. Which part of the world are you joining us from? I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. And so if there are any other Kenyans joining us, happy Mazingira Day. Mazingira is Swahili for Environmental Day. So today we are celebrating and being more intentional about our environment. And so if you're from Kenya, happy Mazingira Day. To everyone else, I hope you're enjoying the rest of your day. So please feel free to type in the chat. I see we have participants from Spain, from India, from Mexico, from Myanmar, from Canada. Thank you, Christian, for joining. We have Gaida from Palestine. We have Zaa, consultant. We have people from Moldova and Amsterdam as well. Please feel free to let us know in the chat box who you are and where you're joining us from. And as we kick off, I want us to intentionally acknowledge that today is World Mental Health Day, as recognized by WHO. This Thursday, we are reminded of the increasing challenges that affect our mental health being on a day-to-day basis, not only due to personal challenges, but also the surmounting global crises and emergencies that we are experiencing, and more importantly for us as EiE practitioners, the workplace that we find ourselves in. The nature of our work as the EiE sector often places us at the forefront of some of the world's most difficult situations, and this can actually take a toll on our well-being. Actually, as I was browsing and preparing for today's session, someone was very intentional to state that as EiE practitioners, our workplace is all about dealing with an emergency, dealing with a disaster, a war zone, or a crisis. And so as we begin today, we hope this webinar will be a meaningful experience for all of us, because WHO this year was very intentional to recognize that it is time to keep prioritizing mental health in the workplace. I hope as we focus on this theme this year, we will be encouraged to look at what can we do at a personal level, at an organizational level, but also as a sector. How can we come together and form a collective action to ensure that our well-being is well taken care of? Having said that, I will look at the agenda for today. Like I've said, today is World Mental Health Day. Happy World Mental Health Day. I hope you take time to reflect on your well-being and your mental health. And as we said, the theme for this year, it is time to prioritize mental health in the workplace. The agenda for today, we will start off with two very key important stuff from people in need sharing the work we do on the ground. Basically, they will share what we do, especially when it comes to PSS. Then we shall have Lucy from War Child Alliance sharing with us what is well-being, welcoming us as a member of the working group, and also sharing from her professional experience how it has been in terms of her well-being and working on the ground. Next, we will have Dana Preston from the Wellbeing Project talking about what is organizational well-being in the social change sector. And she will give us tidbits in terms of what does it mean to start organization well-being. We will also have someone from ECW, Amani, sharing more on their professional experience, but also talking a bit about what ECW is doing in terms of well-being. And then we will have Dr. Ashley Nemiro wrapping for us the session by talking about managing well-being and mental health in the workplace. Feel free at any point to type your questions in the chat, the question and answer segment. Feel free to share your reflections in the chat box. Like I said, it's a very reflective session. We can learn from each other, not only from the panel, but let us start to engage with this session by looking at what do the people in need do and how does it look like in terms of their work. So we'll begin with Muhammad, who will share what he does.
بظل الصراع المستمر وعدم الاستقرار في شمال غرب سوريا، ندرك كعاملين في مجال التعليم أهمية تقديم الدعم النفسي الاجتماعي الشامل أكثر من أي وقت مضى. نعمل في منظمة بيبل النيد على دمج تدخلات الدعم النفسي الاجتماعي للأطفال ضمن العملية التعليمية بالاعتماد على مناهج متعددة، من بينها منهج التعلم العاطفي الاجتماعي ومنهج أنا أتعامل. تسهم هذه المناهج في تعزيز مرونة الأطفال عبر تطوير مهارات حياتية أساسية. أهم هذه المهارات تنظيم العواطف، تعزيز التعاطف، تنمية القدرة على التواصل الفعال، إدارة المشاعر. نسعى من خلال هذه المهارات لبناء علاقات اجتماعية أكثر إيجابية ودعم رفاه الأطفال وضمان تطورهم بشكل سليم على المدى الطويل. هذا ما يساعدهم على مواجهة تحديات بيئتهم بفاعلية والمساهمة في بناء مجتمع أكثر مرونة وتماسكا. لا تقتصر تداخلات الدعم النفسي الاجتماعي المقدمة من قبل بيبل النيد ضمن برنامج التعليم في شمال غرب سوريا على الأطفال فحسب، بل نقوم أيضا بتوفير هذه الخدمات للمعلمين والعاملين في مجال التعليم عند الحاجة بهدف دعم الصحة النفسية والرفاه لديهم، حيث يتم تقديم خدمات تداخلات جماعية وفردية موجهة لحالات الطوارئ، كتقديم خدمات الإسعافات النفسية الأولية للمجتمع المدرسي سواء للكبار والصغار. كانت لنا استجابة شاملة بعد حادثة الزلزال المدمر الذي ضرب شمال سوريا وتركيا في فبراير 2022، حيث تم تقديم الاستجابة على مستويات عدة وبمراحل مدروسة. شملت هذه الاستجابة بالترتيب: أولا الاستجابة الفورية من خلال جلسات ورشات عمل الإسعاف النفسي الأولي الموجهة لفريق التعليم والمعلمين ضمن المدارس. كان الهدف من هذه الجلسات والورشات تخفيف الضيق النفسي لديهم بعد الكارثة، دعم احتياجاتهم النفسية والاجتماعية، تعزيز الإحساس بالسيطرة، بالإضافة لتزويدهم بمهارات وآليات العناية الذاتية وكيفية تخطي الصدمات الناتجة عن حالات الطوارئ. كمرحلة ثانية قمنا أيضا بتدريب ميسري الدعم النفسي الاجتماعي ضمن المدارس على بروتوكول تثبيت متلازمة الضغط النفسي، حيث جاء هذا التدخل ضمن استجابة الإسعافات النفسية الأولية لكارثة الزلزال. تم تدريب الميسرين ميدانيا على بروتوكول تثبيت متلازمة الضغط النفسي للمجموعات وللأفراد. يتضمن هذا البروتوكول مجموعة من التقنيات المنظمة الهادفة للتهدئة النفسية ومعالجة اضطراب السلوك. قام الميسرين فيما بعد بتطبيق هذا البروتوكول ضمن خطط عملهم من خلال جلسات جماعية وفردية مع المعلمين والأطفال في مراكز التعليم. وكمرحلة ثالثة من الاستجابة الشاملة تم توفير قنوات تواصل مع الجهات المتخصصة في ميدان الصحة النفسية، حيث تم تزويد العاملين والمعلمين بقنوات اتصال مباشرة مع جهات متخصصة للصحة النفسية بهدف الحصول على المزيد من الدعم عند الحاجة. مع مرور الوقت يمكننا دائما أن نلمس النتائج الإيجابية والفعالة لمثل هذه التداخلات سواء على مستوى الأطفال أو المعلمين. قمنا بإجراء تقييمات ودراسات لتعقب أثر تداخلات الدعم النفسي الاجتماعي على المعلمين وعلى الأطفال، ولاحظنا على مستوى الأطفال تحسنا ملحوظا في مستويات الصحة النفسية، في الأداء الأكاديمي، أيضا تحسنا في العلاقات مع الأقران. أما على مستوى المعلمين فقد لاحظنا تحسن قدرتهم على التعامل مع الأطفال، أصبحوا أكثر فهما لاحتياجاتهم النفسية والاجتماعية واحتياجات الطلاب، كما تمكنوا من تطوير استراتيجيات تكيف أكثر إيجابية بفضل التدريبات وورش العمل والاستشارات المقدمة لهم على مدار العام الدراسي. بالمجمل هذه الأنشطة أسهمت بشكل كبير في خلق بيئة مدرسية داعمة تعزز من رفاهية الطلاب والمعلمين على حد سواء.
Okay, we've heard from him. We'll hear next from Tagrid.
في ظل الصراع المستمر وعدم استقرار
اسمي تغريد شعشاع، ميسرة الدعم النفسي الاجتماعي بمركز عطاء الخير. شاركت بالاستجابة الطارئة للزلزال اللي صار بتركيا وبسوريا بالمركز يلي أنا فيه، من خلال تقديم الإسعافات الأولية النفسية بهدف خفض التوتر ولإشعار الطالبات بالراحة وبالهدوء. من أهم آليات الاستجابة الطارئة هو تنفيذ لبروتوكول استقرار متلازمة الضغط الحاد. طبعا تلقيت أول مرة التدريب مع منظمة بيبو الإنيد. هذا التدريب ساعدني على خفض التوتر وخفض الضغط، وفي كمان أشخاص ساعدوني على ترتيب الأفكار وساعدوني على خفض الضيق والتوتر من خلال ممارسة التمارين التهدئة الذاتية والتنفس البطني. فأنا هون حاولت أنقل هذا التدريب ونفذه مع الطالبات ومع المعلمات، وكان الحمد لله الأثر إيجابي. في طلاب وطالبات استجابوا مع هذا التدريب ونسبة التوتر انخفضت عندهم، وفي طالبات كانوا هن بحاجة لوقت أكبر. طبعا نحن اشتغلنا مع الطالبات كحالات فردية، نفذنا البروتوكول أكثر من مرة، لاحظنا أنه في استجابة كتير كويسة، والطالبات حبوا التدريب ونقلوا هذا التدريب لأقاربهم، مع أصدقائهم، مع جيرانهم، مع أهاليهم. الحمد لله كانت الاستجابة سريعة والاستجابة كتير جميلة. مع المعلمين كمان نفذنا التدريب كمجموعات، في نسبة من المعلمات استجابوا مع هذا التدريب وانخفض نسبة الضيق والتوتر عندهم. في معلمات لم يستجيبوا، كانوا بحاجة لوقت أكبر. بالنهاية التدريب هو خطوة جميلة وهو بمثابة تعقيم للجرح، وكان خطوة جميلة، ونحن بإمكاننا نستمر بتطبيق هذا البروتوكول بحيث أنه كوسيلة في خفض التوتر من خلال استخدام استراتيجية التهدئة والعناق الفراشي والاسترخاء والتنفس البطني.
Okay. Thank you, people in need, for sharing these videos. The first video highlighted the quantity, let me just say the quantity of work that one person is supposed to handle. You had him talk about offering psychosocial support, bringing together different stakeholders, and just being able to manage the students for them to be able to manage their stress. The second person was able to intentionally share that at People in Need, they were first supported to manage their own stress, and they were taught techniques to manage their well-being before they were able to then pass this on to the teachers and to the learners as well. Maybe to ask at this point, what are some of the things that you have encountered in this sector as we continue to work that are that affect your well-being directly or indirectly? Kindly feel free to type in the chat box for the next 1 minute or so before I introduce the next speaker. Okay. I think the actual event or the crisis for me has been something that affects me directly. Anybody else who wants to share what affects their well-being as we work on a day-to-day basis or from time to time? Culture of the workplace, thank you. The changeable environment, crises, stress of social life, work. That's true. That's quite a number. Someone has shared the heroine complex. We want to go and save everyone and rescue everyone, and we forget about ourselves. The context with multiple crises, very true. That can be a source of affecting our well-being and our mental health. Any other, I'd say, stressors or factors that affect your well-being and mental health? Balancing work responsibilities and family, the workload, stress, multitasking, very, very true. Lack of work-life balance. I was just about to share that. Thank you for whoever shared that. I think sometimes finding a balance at some point in terms of your work and life can be a source of stress. So having said that, allow me to introduce our next speaker.
اسمي تغريد شعشان ميسرة الدعم
Sorry. And our next speaker is Lucy Akan Odoke, who will be welcoming us on behalf of the working group. This is a webinar that has been put together by the PSS-SEL Working Group. Apart from the Wellbeing project, every other speaker is actually a member of the working group. And so we kick off today with Lucy. And Lucy is a senior coordinator and program development, education at War Child Holland organization. Now it's War Child Alliance. She has worked in the Education in Emergencies programming since 2009. So she's coming to share with a lot of experience, and she is a member of the INEE PSS-SEL Working Group. As an educator, Lucy is passionate about providing contextualized education, working closely with EiE partners in EdTech space and AMP, providing integrated mental health and psychosocial care for teachers in refugee settlement in Uganda. Lucy provides training and mentorship in teacher well-being and SEL, working with program staff and national implementing partners in the refugee education response in Uganda. Having introduced Lucy, allow me to invite her to unmute herself. And Lucy, this is your session.
Wow, thank you so much, Esther. And on behalf of the PSS-SEL Working Group, I want to thank each of you for joining us this time for this very important conversation. As already mentioned, and of course, many of you know firsthand, working in education in emergency presents unique challenges. The emotional, mental demands placed on EiE practitioners are immense. And whether it's conflict zone, disaster areas, or displacement settings, the pressure to deliver education while managing our own well-being and that of our teams can sometimes feel overwhelming, And of course, in recognition of this World Mental Health Day, celebrated this week, it reminds us of the critical importance of prioritizing mental health, not just for the people we serve, but especially for ourselves and our colleagues. This year's theme, as already indicated, it's time to prioritize mental health in the workplace. It's particularly relevant for all of us in the EiE space. So I'm really so honored to share my experience to the team. Today, we'll explore how we as the practitioners, can work together to foster collective well-being. We will hear also from other speakers what we will share, who will share their insights on mental health strategies, resilience building, and the role of collective action in ensuring that we support each other in this vital work. So please, in the next 90 minutes, we will cover specifically one, the practical strategies for maintaining mental and emotional health in emergency settings. 2, the importance of collective action in creating supportive work environments. And 3, how organizations can balance staff well-being with the demands of crisis programming. So to get started, I would like to share with you a brief definition of what well-being is. Of course, I know we all have the scholarly definition, but on the basic understanding, well-being refers to a state of overall health and happiness encompassing physical, mental, emotional, and social aspects of one's life. And it includes feeling good about oneself, having positive relationships, managing stress effectively, maintaining sense of purpose, having the resources to meet life's challenges. And overall, well-being is not just the absence of illness or negative emotions, but a holistic balance of mind, body, environment that allows individuals to thrive, and experience fulfillment. So most time when you talk about well-being, it's not about absence of negative emotions and feeling. It encompasses all that. So that's a starting point, and it's very key to note. Looking at the well-being at work, is, of course, holistically, we can look at it as a state of employees' physical, mental, emotional, social health within their work environment. And also it encompasses factors such as job satisfaction, stress management, work-life balance, positive interpersonal relationship, and a supportive workplace culture. Now, a focus of well-being, workplace well-being ensures that employees feel valued, motivated, and equipped to perform their roles effectively while maintaining, overall health. And this is the approach, not to benefit individuals, but also to enhance productivity of all the employees in terms of reducing, absenteeism and fostering positive organizational culture. Having said that, also based on my background, I want to share just a few experience on how this can manifest in life. My personal story, of course, as a focal person in education, as introduced already by Esther, my major role encompasses supporting proposal development, coordinating line ministries, sector working groups, technical support to partners, and also 50% field support in terms of training and mentorship staff, mentoring staff, partners, and ensuring quality of implementation and project, to mention but a few. So all these come with very tough condition of work that impacted on my well-being. Most times, some of you might resonate with these issues of multitask. Most times we forget about our own self. So our well-being may also take a toll. This wasn't an exception for me. So due to the high demand of the job roles, in terms of high expectation for quick turnaround, fast pace of key deliverables, proposal deadline, reports, all this, I felt that, my mental well-being was now retarding. I wasn't taking good care of myself. And this was manifested in terms of long hours of work, emotional stress, lack of control on some of the key job tasks, especially where it involved coordination with the stakeholders. So as a result, sometimes I started experiencing a lot of procrastination in my work, delaying even key deliverables, not intentionally, but because you really feel overwhelmed. And more importantly, you are stressed and your productivity my productivity started retarding. However, again, when you look at the EiE sector, most of our projects are short-term, providing emergency response. And this also translates into short-term job and contracts. So this kind of presents also job insecurity for staff. And as a result, as the year is ending, I feel overwhelmed, stressed, sure whether you have a next contract. All these impact on our well-being. So with this, from what I have been experiencing, I acknowledge that yes, some of these things are really far much beyond my control. For example, the impact had already started affecting my life. A lot of fatigue, headache, body pain, sleep disorder, mood swing, and sometimes, you even have a negative feeling inwardly, like you feel some bit of inadequacy because you kind of delayed, you failed to perform a task, you feel like things are not working out. And this is the worst form when now it started exhibiting in terms of, I started feeling isolated, delaying also key tasks. Worst of all, it affected my personal life, even at home, my relationship with the colleagues at work, I would keep to myself. At home, I started exhibiting some behavior that even affected my children. One time I found myself backing on my children at home for reasons which were not even very clear. So having realized that, I had to take a step and say, no, I need to do something about this. And this was the time now when we started rolling out a mental health and psychosocial support program for teachers on a research basis. And as a trainer, I had to go back to look at my notes and started practicing some of the strategies. How do I take care of myself? And the key areas that I really picked to work on was those kind of difficult thoughts that could come in my mind, feeling of inadequacy, negative feeling of maybe I'm not doing things right, maybe I need to do extra more, and yet I am already experiencing a situation of having too much work-related tasks done, even my personal needs. So work-life balance became like a real challenge. And when I took a step back to reflect on this, I had to start back and look at my values. What is it that I really want? And how would I want my life to be? And that helped to guide me to take immediate commitment and the actions. And this I drew from the from the acceptance and commitment therapy, which helps helping guide individuals live a life according to their values. And these are some of the techniques that we really train teachers to practice. The first thing I had to do was to take a leave. And through support from my line manager, I got a leave, sat back, reflected, developed strategies in terms of balancing my work, prioritizing what are the key tasks I need to do. From the different tasks I need to do, which one can I do first? And then at the end of the day, I would sit back and review what have I done, and then also be grateful. That helped me a lot to thank myself and also not judge myself for things that I have not done right. And these are some of the techniques we are training teachers, to be able to manage stress, do practice reflection, and then be able to accept and not blame yourself for things that have not worked out properly. The other thing is that in my work, I had a very good supportive manager who would really guide and support me in terms of discussing some of the key tasks. And this really created a lot of good rapport and working. It created a very good working relationship between myself and my manager, understanding what I needed and then the support that I had to receive. So at organizational level, we were able to discuss some of the strategies in terms of having reduced work time, in that we would balance working from home and also at office in a week with that grid schedule. And this also helped a lot. So in a nutshell, from the experience I've had, we really need to prioritize self-care at work. And this helps you to not re-energize. Self-care would mean taking a break or taking a leave or doing exercise regularly. These are some of the strategies I learned. And most importantly, to point out, we have been practicing together with the teachers mindfulness practice as a key strategy. This helps in grounding and also being physically present in the moment. Through the mindfulness practice, I've been able to try and see my inner feelings, my emotions, my thought processes, and then relate it to the environment. So like when you're feeling overwhelmed, there's a way you can ground yourself through that breathing exercise, the mindfulness practice. And then you'll be able to pick up again and see what is it that you need to do next. So bringing this experience to the broader workplace, as we are seeing the well-being at workplace today, having noticed some of the risks that I was already getting through in terms of excessive workload, lack of work-life balance, maybe a feeling of inadequacy, a feeling of job insecurity, I've been able now to work around immediately to improve on that personal initiative, which including getting enough rest as at individual level, and also mitigating pressure of work in terms of creating work schedule, creating work schedule to reduce stress, and also including key priorities that would allow me take on adequate amount of tasks, complete them, and then also rationing what can wait and what needs to be done very fast. Those really help me a lot. And then overall, to improve my well-being, I emphasize on self-care, getting enough rest, exercising regularly, scheduling time for personal relaxation and reflection. All these are strategies that also help me at individual level, but also as a team, through our staff welfare council, we've been able to advocate for some team building activities in that as a policy review, these have already been taken care of. We have our team building activity at least every month. We get together, we connect, we share, and then we also learn from each other. So this alone helps like staff to feel they have a community of, they belong to, which is a very good initiative for the workplace. So basically, these are my key few experience to share. Of course, I know there are very many other professional strategies, but this is purely based on the experience working in the EiE sector. And thank you so much. Over to you, Esther.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for being vulnerable to even share what have been some of the challenges, how you've been able to deal with them at a personal level. I think one key takeout as you are sharing is you cannot give what you don't have. So you can't teach teachers to take care of themselves and you're not taking care of yourself. But you've also mentioned about what the organization has been able to do in terms of supporting you. If you have any questions, Lucy, please feel free to type them in the chat. Next, we're going to have Dana. Dana is going to introduce us to the Wellbeing Project and what they do. And she's going to talk about organizational well-being and how we as social change catalysts can ensure our well-being is well maintained. Dana has had the privilege and pleasure of weaving her personal interests and values in her professional career. She has a love for Latin America and the Caribbean. Dana has also been in that region for more than 12 years, and she currently lives in Mexico City, where she has been for over a decade. I think she has so much commitment in terms of intersectional feminism, and this has gifted her the chance to work with for diverse organizations and nonprofits in North and Central America. Dana has decided to look for ways to work at the intersection of inner well-being and social change. There's so much to say about Dana that I'm looking for the slideshow to share briefly.
It's all good.
Profile.
That's
and
perfect.
So with that, this journey has led her to the Wellbeing Project, where she currently leads developmental efforts, building out a broad base of financial and non-financial resources for greater well-being and mental health in the global social change field. Having said that, I allow Dana to share her screens and to take us through her presentation. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you so much, Esther. Good morning, everyone. I'll just get my slides up. Good morning from sunny Mexico City. I'm really honored to be here today. And after your share, Lucy, I'm feeling really grateful for your braveness and vulnerability and sharing challenges. For me, I think that's such an essential part of well-being. there's a big aspect that I've seen globally of this sense of feeling like we don't have permission to focus on our well-being. And I believe in part that sense of permission can come from hearing others go through this process and prioritizing their well-being. So I feel that's a huge gift that you've given to everyone on the call today. My name is Dana. I work with the Wellbeing Project. I focused on development and partnerships. And I have many slides, so I'm going to do my best to get through them all with you. So for the Wellbeing Project, we're a 10-year-old network, and we are focused on catalyzing a culture of inner well-being in the social change sector. And we're inspired by some of the most prolific social change leaders, and knowing that they themselves drew on their deep inner journeys and inner well-being practices. And we believe this is essential to meeting the current interconnected crises that we're facing today. So we're really trying to reimagine the social change sector, reimagine a sector that is not prioritizing the hero-heroine complex, that does not have impossible workloads, that's not chronically under-resourced. We're really trying to imagine something different where there can be change makers that are well in a holistic sense. And we believe that that is the answer to being able to drive forward the kinds of solutions needed to meet social and environmental challenges meeting us today. We're a co-creation with a handful of the organizations. A handful of them are on the screen. And working as a co-creation as a network has really allowed us to, I think, have powerful ripple effects across the social change sector. We work with change makers. It's a very inclusive definition of change makers, anyone trying to make the world more just and equitable. We're working on diverse topics, and we're in diverse sectors. So we hear about the poly crisis. There is a mental health pandemic. There are ministries of loneliness popping up across the world. There are deep-seated issues of trauma and unwellness in the general population. And this is particularly felt by social change leaders because they are the ones trying to support the general population. So through research of our own at the Wellbeing Project and that of others, we know that social change leaders are facing disproportionate levels of unwellness. One that I like to pick up, someone mentioned, Lucy, you mentioned the financial aspect in our well-being. And so there's a study about young change makers globally, and 50% of them lack financial security. There's no way you can have well-being if you're worried about paying your bills month to month. So the mental health pandemic with the general population, acutely felt by change makers who are trying to support that global population. And then we see the effects it's having on the social change sector, like nonprofit talent shortages. We know that people are leaving the social change sector because it's untenable. Being able to deal with burnout multiple times just pushes people out. And so then we're left with a social change sector, the people that are there that are unwell, and much of the talent has left. So at the Wellbeing Project, we are focused on making sure that the social change sector prioritizes well-being. We want it to be normalized. We want it to be accessible. And then we also want change makers to feel like they have the permission to access those well-being supports. In a previous job, I was working at a grant-making organization supporting women's rights organizations in Mexico and Central America. And we began experimenting with ways to support their mental health and well-being as women human rights defenders. We created an emergency response fund on top of their regular grant making so they could find support for emergency situations or to support their well-being. And when we first announced it, no one reached out to access these funds, and I couldn't believe it. We had to reach out individually and have conversations, and we learned that these nonprofits didn't feel the permission to accept that kind of support. Some were concerned that they would look like they were struggling, and maybe that would affect their future funding from foundations. Some were worried that it could be looked as stigmatized. So there's a really big issue about permissioning that I think I really want to drive down on. And I'm just realizing I didn't check the time when I started. So I want to make sure I don't go over. Let's say, so our solution. I think what's important about the Wellbeing Project is that we are looking at well-being from a very interconnected systemic lens. And we'll see that in our theory of change. But just to show you how we're working as a global network, we're really trying to strengthen the field to have well-being supports normalized and accessed by change makers. So we do that by strengthening the case, research, to show that there is a connection between our inner worlds and the kind of social change outcomes. When we are well, our social change outcomes are more creative, collaborative, and innovative. We're building and stewarding our 1,200 organization network, and those members are implementing well-being initiatives for their teams, the communities they serve, and this is how we see ripple effects. As the Wellbeing Project, we're trying to accelerate well-being initiatives amongst our network members, providing resources. So there's increasingly more support for them to scale and innovate their well-being initiatives. And then we have two transversal pieces of work, which is storytelling. So how do we change the narrative from well-being is taboo or stigmatized, change the narrative that well-being is a luxury or a nice to have, but really trying to frame it as essential to meeting the challenges we're facing today in the social change sector. And then the last transversal piece of work that we're doing is a series of regional gatherings to build change makers together, the Wellbeing Summit series, bring them together for an experience of belonging and community with other change makers that believe the social change sector can be different and can prioritize well-being and be healthier. And I'll share a bit more about that. So our theory of change is really looking at how all these levels are interconnected. And this has come up very clearly in the presentations today so far, from the individual to the organizational, the sector itself, and then societal and planetary. We really make sure that we're looking at this interconnected level because my well-being is tied up in your well-being and vice versa. So if we're not looking at it from that lens, we don't feel that we'll really get to a point where well-being is truly accessible, normalized, and taken up. So the next two slides are just part of our approach at the Wellbeing Project as a global network, how we are framing well-being. I appreciated your definition, Lucy, and also that everyone, well-being means something different to everyone, and it's going to change drastically depending on your identity, where you're based, the context. But what we do want to make sure is clear that we want to look at the systemic structural roots that can support well-being. We hear a ton about burnout, but we want to look at what are the root causes behind burnout. So we have two initiatives that are transversal to everything we're doing. The first is ecological belonging. And this is really looking at the fact that today we generally are totally disconnected from ourselves, each other, and disconnected from the broader natural world. And so we're doing communications, research, programming to really lift up and see how can we renew this sense of connection to ourselves, each other, and the broader natural world. And we feel that will really support a more holistic sense of well-being in the sector with positive ripple effects in society and for the planet. And the second large piece of multidisciplinary work happening across our Wellbeing Project network is intergenerational trauma. So how do we bring in a trauma and healing informed approach to well-being in the sector? We know most change makers have experienced trauma themselves from discrimination, violence, oppression, forced displacement. So we've posited if we're not addressing trauma amongst change makers, we can't get to well-being. We can't even get close to well-being. So we really are looking at deeper issues behind the burnout, behind the unwellness, and trauma is absolutely essential to be addressing in the sector. I mentioned a series of summits that are happening where we have our change makers gather for a sense of belonging, community, actionable hope, where there are multidisciplinary approaches and speakers talking about the intersection of inner well-being and social change at those different levels. And they've been an extraordinary way to advance people's journeys in really embodying well-being and then working to make it more accessible for their organizations, the communities they serve. So you can see there's a quite global spread. Many more happening in 2025. These are the ones from 24. Afterwards, I'll have a link where you can register your interest to participate in upcoming summits. All the summits do their best to offer as many scholarships as possible, so these are truly accessible. But this is an incredible way to get plugged into our global network through regional gatherings and regional hubs within our network, to be in community with others that are really trying to center well-being and social change. So today I'm going to be talking about organizational well-being, and I think what we'll do is, well, first, I just want to frame organizational well-being is essential for us in that it's a key piece of having a well-being informed approach to the social change sector. So when I showed our theory of change, we've got individual well-being, and organizational is a huge piece. We're all parts most of us are parts of organizations, and where you work can make or break your well-being. And so if we have people unwell in organizations, if our organizations have toxic workplace cultures, what does that say about the quality of social change outcomes that are happening? So we've been focusing on organizational well-being for the past 6 years with a community of practice called the Organizational Exploratory Program. It's a cohort of 8 diverse nonprofits from across the globe that were on a learning journey to really put well-being at the heart of their organizational culture, to institutionalize it. And the idea was, it was called exploratory because we don't define what well-being looks like because we work globally. But so it's really also to explore and see what emerged. So what I'm going to share are findings from this 5-year program. What emerged in terms of how to support workplace well-being in the social change sector. These are where the participating organizations are based, and they were working on diverse topics from education to migration, women's rights, and beyond. We had qualitative and quantitative research wrapped around this. The final knowledge products will be coming out hopefully this year, potentially early next year. What I'm sharing are the interim findings, and as soon as those final findings are ready, we'll be sure to get them to Esther. So I think we'll just stay on this slide, but you'll have access to all the other slides, which do a deep dive on each one of these categories. So we're not calling this a framework because it's really more, these are groupings of activities that emerged in this program that led to positive results around organizational well-being. So you can see there's 8 groupings here, and they're really focused on addressing structural issues within organizations so that well-being can be institutionalized and not just an add-on, not just here's a free annual subscription to a meditation app. Now we have well-being in the organization. There's really many moving pieces. So the first is transparent and timely internal communication. This was the grouping of changes that our participating organizations saw, where they saw that by having more transparency around financials, around hiring processes, around even celebrations and big wins, especially for big geographically dispersed organizations, better internal communication led to positive outcomes for well-being in the organizations. The next is building on communication, staff consultation, participation, and consent. So some organizations experimented with staff surveys, town hall meeting style gatherings to really see how staff were feeling. So staff felt part of a process and not like something was being done to them. And that led to positive outcomes around staff well-being. Building social contact, connections, and community. Some ways that organizations experimented with this were going on walks together amongst the team members. During the height of the pandemic, it was more social happy hours online, but finding ways to connect beyond the role of your professional title and connecting as whole human beings. Our participants reported that by getting to know people on a deeper human level, their collaboration as colleagues improved, and that contributed to better well-being. The next is integrating inner work practices into organizational life. So that might be the app for the meditation practice. It might be yoga classes. It might be walking in nature. It really depends on the context of each organization. For some, it was making sure they added in personal check-ins before getting into business meetings, or adding in a breathing exercise at the beginning or end of an meeting. So bringing that inner work practice was a huge piece of this, but on its own is not enough to sustain organizational well-being. The next is mitigating pressures of workloads. Lucy, you talked about this. This is a huge issue. If this isn't being addressed, you can't have well-being. So looking at tools and technologies that could streamline processes, looking at ways to reduce the number of meetings. When it comes to funders and all of the requirements that funders put on us as nonprofits and reporting, really trying to push back and negotiate lesser reporting requirements. All these things helped reduce, let's say, mitigate pressures of workloads, and then also looking at how to monitor that. So if you see that someone that's getting overwhelmed with their workload, how can that be addressed? The second to last grouping is the material conditions of staff. So some of the organizations looked at how they might be able to readjust the budget to make salaries more competitive. Some looked at adding more generous parental leave. Some looked at engaging with the government for getting government support to provide extra material support for their staff, but really looking at how do we improve the financial well-being of our team members. And then finally, micro shifts to structure, policies, and process. I think one of the key learnings, this idea of micro shifts, you can't change an organizational culture from one day to the next. And our participants found that making these mini shifts little by little is what led to sustained change on the path to organizational well-being. So I'm just going to share some key learnings. I'm going to quickly just fast forward these slides, which you'll have access to, so you'll be able to go into them. But I just want to wrap up here. So some of the key learnings from this program: no silver bullets, no one size fits all. It will depend on the organization, the context, and where they're based, et cetera. The importance of micro shifts, which I've already mentioned. Modeling the change you want to see. There is a very important aspect with this program, which was that to participate in this program, one person within the organization had to have gone through their own inner well-being program. So we had an individual program, which then led to the organizational. So something that's really key for this kind of organizational change: leadership has to be behind this. Leadership has to be convinced that this is important and a priority, and leadership needs to model those changes. So that was something that was very clear in this program as well. Becoming comfortable with uncertainty and knowing that our organizations are complex and operate in complex settings, and knowing that because there's no one recipe for organizational well-being, just being comfortable with that uncertainty. Inclusion is key, making sure that as many voices in the organization are included as possible, to bring all perspectives to the table. The next is focusing on the process and not the end goal. We know that well-being is not a final destination. We never get to a point and say, yay, I have well-being. We have organizational well-being, and it's done. It's an ongoing process, and to focus more on that than that end goal. And it's an ongoing process to really make it part of the culture. So with that, for you all, just as we go on with the rest of our days or evenings, just the invitation to think about, does any of this resonate with you? For questions that you have, you'll have our contact information and some resources to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Dana, for that quick introduction of the Wellbeing Project and organizational well-being. I hope there are things that we have been able to pick up and be able to see how we can incorporate that into our well-being as organizations. So as we proceed, please note you can share your questions in the Q&A chat, and our panelists will be able to address them effectively. As I introduce our next speaker to wrap this up for us, if you are subscribed to Education Cannot Wait newsletter and communication, they were very important. Something the director, Yasmin Sharif, said stood out for me, and I just wanted to share this with us. On World Mental Health Day, we must remember the crucial role that education plays in addressing these abnormal experiences through mental health and psychosocial services for students, teachers, and their communities. Without healing the victims of these abnormal and horrendous life-changing events, no child can concentrate and learn, nor will it be easy for teachers to encourage and empower their students. Mental health matters. At Education Cannot Wait, a global fund for education in emergencies and protracted crises, we make mental health and psychosocial support a top priority. Healing is essential for every affected child and teacher in order to achieve their learning outcomes. We cannot make our mental health and psychosocial support a priority for others if we are not doing it for ourselves. So to wrap up this session for us, I also want to just quote, because this is the work we do, we spend so much of our day spent at work. It is crucial that work promotes and protects mental health. And this is a quote from WHO, the World Health Organization. And our next speaker is actually from WHO. And this is none other than Dr. Ashley Namiro, who is a global mental health and professional and licensed clinician with over 16 years experience, dedicated to transforming mental health systems and implementing impactful programs within the humanitarian and developmental context. She has a vast wealth of experience and learnings. And for us to just be able to wrap all this up, Ashley has also demonstrated a strong ability to lead workforce developmental initiatives that strengthen health professionals, child protection actors, and educators to create sustainable change within their communities. So with that, I invite Dr. Ashley to unmute herself and take us through well-being in the workplace for EiE practitioners.
Thank you so much, Esther, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is wonderful to be here with you today, and thank you to the previous speakers, Lucy and Dana, for your wonderful presentations. I just want to acknowledge that it has been a really hard year for EiE practitioners and more generally humanitarian practitioners. There have been a multitude of humanitarian crises, and more so than ever, frontline workers have been under attack, which we know directly affects not only their well-being, but the well-being of their colleagues, their families, and the communities that they are surrounded by. And that's why, next slide, please. That's why I think it's so important that this year's theme on Mental Health Day is prioritizing mental health in the workplace. As Esther said, and my colleagues who spoke before me said so eloquently, that we spend so much of our time at work. A lot of us, because we are in the social care system, the education system, the health system, that we came into these jobs because we believe in protecting and caring and nurturing and educating people. And therefore, we oftentimes give ourselves fully to our jobs, which means that many hours out of our week are dedicated to that job. So it's not surprising that our workplace can negatively and positively affect our mental health. I want to talk really quickly before I dive into some products at the World Health Organization that have been created on how to support your mental health and well-being into a quick activity. So my dear colleague Lucy spoke already about the definition of well-being. I want to ask all of the participants here with us today, if they feel comfortable, of course, to write a few things in the chat regarding how they support their mental health and well-being. So for example, this could be going on walks. This could be buying coffee in the morning. It could be spending time with friends, or could be sitting down and petting your dog or going for a run. So just think of a few things in your life that support your own well-being. And if you feel comfortable, you can type those in the chat and share those with us. I'll just give you a minute or two to do that. Great, thank you so much. So talking to friends, exercising, watching comedy, trying to avoid the news, good sleep, great running and reading, hanging out with friends, going on walks, reading a book, sleep, a long walk with music. Yeah, sharing moments with colleagues, running in the backyard after lunch, going dancing, good quality sleep. I see a lot of commonalities. So there's a lot around social connections, connection to colleagues, friends, family members, also physical activity, moving our bodies, sleeping is a really important one that I see coming up a lot. And let's see what else. Listening to music, reading, great, going into nature. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. So I want to briefly talk about the well-being flower, which represents the many different dimensions of well-being. And I'm sure that many of you have seen this before, but I just wanted to go through some of these domains of well-being. And while I'm talking about it, I would love for you to think about which domains the components that you put in the chat, how do they fit into these different domains? And are there domains, for example, that you might recognize that maybe you're not engaging in activities around? So I'll just speak about it really quickly. So physical and biological is looking at things that are necessary to keep the body alive, such as food, medical support, water. The effectiveness of these services depend on what's socially available, culturally, educational characteristics, opportunities, and constraints within the population. Also material, so all non-living aspects of the physical environment, for example, roads, vehicles, tools, equipment, structures in which people live and work. Mental, cognitive, thinking, and learning, and this includes ways to learn and acquire information and be able to use it. And we all know that in emergency situations, it's crucial that people can obtain information and understand, process, and remember it. Emotional. So one must feel well to truly be well. An adequate level of emotional functioning is needed to make effective use of the resources and opportunities that have the potential to strengthen well-being. Also social, all forms of human interaction. So family is a fundamental social unit, strengthening family ties, also feeling as though you are a member of the community, feeling as though you participate in social and cultural groups. Cultural is learned patterns of beliefs, thoughts, and behaviors. Spiritual is many people find meaning and value in some kind of religious expression or practice. religion can be understood as in a structured way to deal with spiritual reality in which participants believe. So obviously then on the sides, we have safety, participation, and development. And when I talk about safety, it's really the need for safety. And this is obvious. For us to feel well and be well, we need to also feel safe. That's a core component of our well-being. And participation and agency. And we all know this so well, that if we are able to participate in society, feel a sense of agency around decision-making, not only in our workplace, but also at home, in our community, that also promotes well-being. And then development. And this is at an individual level and also a societal level. So I'm curious if some of you see these aspects that you put in the chat in this well-being flower. And I show this to you because I want to highlight just how multifaceted well-being is and how many different components are contribute to our well-being as adults, as members of families, as members of workplace, as member of communities. So this is a really nice exercise to do with practitioners when you're working with them, really helping them to think through different aspects of well-being and how within each of these framework, they support their own well-being. Thank you so much. And next slide. Great. So when we think about EiE practitioner well-being, and this is also related to teacher well-being, just generally adult well-being, is 4 really important components is self-efficacy. So the need around self-efficacy, job stress and burnout. My colleagues have previously spoke about that. Also job satisfaction. So it's not only feeling stress or burnout in our job, but actually what contributes to well-being is, am I satisfied in my job? Do I get fulfillment in my job? Do I work with colleagues who are kind? We get along well? Do I feel like I'm making a difference? And actually that's incredibly important to a lot of people that are working in the same sector as us. As I talked about before, many reasons why we got into this space is because we truly cared about the work that we were doing. And of course, social emotional competencies. So we talk a lot about social emotional learning as it comes to education spaces and teaching social emotional learning to children. But in fact, social emotional competencies are really important to our own well-being as practitioners, as clinicians, as teachers, etc. And just really quickly going through these is self-efficacy can be, you can increase this really by peer support, learning new strategies, and becoming more confident in your job, for example. So we all know is when we feel that we can contribute, that we feel more fulfilled in our roles. Job stress and burnout. So for example, one way that we can promote well-being is by learning new strategies, for example, to take care of ourselves in our job, asking for help. Lucy shared a beautiful story about her own experience of really ensuring that she could curb stress, job stress and burnout, taking time for herself. Thank you for sharing that, Lucy. Job satisfaction. So and I recognize that this is a big privilege actually, but doing something that we love. And oftentimes the need to earn income, to care for our families, for our communities get in the way of this. But if all possible, doing something that you love. And then lastly, this social emotional competencies. And we all know this is really around cognitive, social, and emotional cooperation skills. And it really supports the improvement of well-being. And we think of social emotional learning just for children, but in fact, we can also engage in social emotional learning as adults. And of course, all these aspects are really influenced by individual factors. And that's the important thing to remember too, when we're talking about mental health in the workplace, is that it's not only, my well-being is not only influenced by me as an individual. It's also influenced by if I'm working in a school, if I'm working as an administrator, but school factors. What is happening in the school that I'm working in the community I'm working in? And then also, what are the policies, what are the systems in place at national level, regional level, and global contexts? So what is going on around me? And this is very much thinking about the socio-ecological model. And it's the systems that are surrounding the individual that, of course, affect every aspect of our life and ultimately well-being. Next slide, please. And now I'm just going to talk about some tools that have been developed at the World Health Organization to support well-being. I know there are a ton of tools out there, and I'm just going to talk about 2 today that I think not only you could use in your own life, but also you can support colleagues with these tools. You can support teachers, other EiE practitioners, either by running through these activities together or also running sessions. So this is a resource that's called Doing What Matters in the Time of Stress. It very much came out during the COVID-19 pandemic because what we realized very quickly is that there are a ton of people in need of mental health and psychosocial support services, and they couldn't access them. We know that a lot of people can't access services anyways, but during a global pandemic, those services decrease significantly. And really, doing what matters in the time of stress is based around the fact that there are many causes of stress, including personal difficulties, conflict with loved ones, lack of income, conflict with colleagues, or major threats in the community, which we know that so many of the EiE practitioners that we're working with actually experience theirself, such as violence, disease outbreaks. And this Doing What Matters in the Time of Stress guide is really for anyone who's experiencing stress, ranging from adults, health professionals, teachers, EiE practitioners, whoever it may be. And it's really a self-guided tool that anyone can pick up. And it has core strategies that have been that are based in evidence and really have been proven to work when it comes to decreasing stress. So for example, grounding techniques, acting on your own values, engaging, unhooking, making room, and being kind. So in this manual, you can really go through it on your own and learn different strategies and tools to be able to support you and loved ones, community members, colleagues. I think what's so nice about this tool is it really breaks down different aspects of well-being and really provides psychoeducation as well, which I think oftentimes knowledge is power when it comes to our well-being. Knowing how stress affects your body as an individual, knowing what triggers you as an individual, knowing what affects your loved ones and how they can be triggered. Next slide, please. And the next one is called Self-Help Plus. So this is WHO's 5-session stress management course for large groups of up to 30 peoples. So this is actually delivered by supervised non-specialist facilitators who complete a short training course. And we're actually working on putting that training course online. And it uses pre-recorded audio and illustrated guide and to teach stress management skills. And this course is really, again, suitable for adults who are experiencing stress. And the nice thing is it can be delivered in quite a large group, which is incredible because it means it just makes it more accessible to individuals. So before we wrap up, I just really, today, I've been at the World Health Organization in Geneva, and we had a special session on workplace mental health. And 3 things that I really want to point out from that session and bring here to all of you is when it comes to workplace mental health, there's kind of 3 components that we need to think of. And one is prevention. So prevention is reshaping work environments to minimize psychosocial risks and prevent workers experiencing mental health concerns. So that's one. What are we doing within our places of employment to prevent distress, prevent burnout? And the second one is, how are we protecting and promoting mental health and well-being? So strengthening awareness, skills, and opportunities for recognizing and acting early on mental health and psychosocial support concerns to protect and promote the mental health of all workers. And so one of those, for example, is training managers to protect the mental health and well-being of their team. Training workers and using individual approaches such as the ones I just shared to you. And the third one is support. So we know that in every place that we work, there are going to be employees that experience stress, that experience burnout. And so what type of support is available for them? Do they have people to talk to? Is the manager trained to be able to support them in that setting? And how do we ensure that they can return to work in a way that feels comfortable for them and in a way where hopefully they do not go back to a place where they experience burnout or poor mental health and well-being? So I know that it is now time for Q&A, and thank you all so much for listening. And I will put my email in the chat if you have any further questions. And thank you so much to INEE and the PSS-SEL Working Group for putting on this very important webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley Namiru, for that presentation. Please note, okay, did you want to talk about this, Ashley? Or
That's okay, because I think we're out of time.
okay, thank you. Please note, we will share all the resources Dana has shared with us from the Wellbeing Project, and Ashley has shared with us from the WHO. We'll share with you in the communication. At this point, even as we go into the Q&A, we want to look at what can it look like in terms of a call for collective action. And I want us to look at and just acknowledge that the challenges we have been facing, we don't need to continue facing them in isolation. They are unique, and they're unique in the sector, but we are facing them together. So the call is, if we come together, we can be stronger and we can support one another. I like what Ashley has shared with her last point: support, support, support. If we're able to come together and support each other at an organizational level, at a sectoral level, at a regional level, at a global level, then we are able to come together and become more intentional in terms of prioritizing our well-being, and this will increase our productivity, and this will create more impact and make us attain more job satisfaction in what we need to do. So imagine how much more impact we can have as a sector if we intentionally prioritize well-being as a collective action. Not only are we going to create healthier, more resilient teams, we are also going to be better equipped to deliver the much needed service of education and support the crisis affected communities that so desperately need our support. I want to close the presentations by asking us to make a commitment that from today, we can do simple things like checking in on each other, contributing to wider initiatives in our sector when it comes to well-being, and even looking at, are we very clear with what are the policies in our organization when it comes to mental health? How are we using them? And even how are we advocating for more well-being? So as we come to a close, I want to share a Swahili proverb with you that I felt was very linked to what we're talking about in terms of collective action. And it says, umoja ni nguvu, utengano ni udhaifu. And in English, what it means simply is, unity is strength. But if we continue being divided and divisive, then we continue having a weak point within the sector. So thank you for that. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Lucy. We were supposed to have Amani from ECW joining us on the panel, but it seems he's having internet connectivity issues. We hope to have him in future webinars, and he can talk more about what ECW is also doing in terms of mental health and psychosocial support as an organization for their staff and even beyond. So allow me to stop the slides and look at, do we have any questions that we need to address before we leave? I see we have a few minutes. So the resources, if you don't see them on the chat, please know they'll come with the thank you email. The session, you'll also get a recording of it. Diana, people would like to connect with you more, Dana. So we'll also definitely be able to link them up with the Wellbeing project for that. And Abdullahi, you requested for some resources that we can be able to share with you as INEE, but it wasn't, the resources requested for were not focused on the topic that we are discussing today, but we can definitely share with you those resources. Any questions from the chat I have not addressed? You can chat, you can type your question, and then we could address it to the panel in the next 2 or 3 minutes, and then we can wrap up this session. Thank you, Diana.
Hi, Esther. Just flagging that I
yes, Maria.
repost a question from the Q&A on the chat about how to offer support to the LGBTQ students in a refugee camp. So I'm not sure if you want to address that one that is pending.
I think that when we can forward it to Lauren, our gender coordinator, to be able to link up with them and be able to understand how much more support they may need and link them up with the correct resources. So we can definitely link them up with that out of this session. Kindly type your question. Frederick, I see your hand is up. Please type your question if it's possible. Please know you can reach out to any of our panelists once we share their contacts for more support. You can also reach out to me in case you need any more technical support from INEE. Please note INEE is a network that wants to ensure that all its members are holistically well taken care of. So I know as PSS-SEL, we're always focusing on the learner and the teacher, but we felt at a sectoral level, it would be good to recognize this mental health day by looking at what can we do intentionally as members of this agency and as a sector on what we can do to enhance our well-being. So with that, I will bring the webinar to a close. Any more questions, feel free to email me and I'll respond to them or link you up to the relevant panelists. Thank you once again, Dana, Lucy, Ashley, Maria, for your support. Thank you, INEE, for this platform. Thank you, everyone who took time, 90 minutes, to just sit in and engage with us and interact with the materials. I hope this has been a meaningful webinar for you, and look out for more webinars that are being planned for and will be hosted by the PSS-SEL Working Group in the coming months. Have a lovely rest of your day, and please, there's no health without your mental health. So please prioritize it.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you, everyone
Bye-bye.
on the chat. Thank
Bye.
you.